No one wanted this dog. Families walked past him without a glance, choosing others who wagged and played. He was rejected over and over, his quiet eyes pleading for a chance. To everyone, he looked like just another unwanted stray. But then a man stopped, knelt down, and noticed something no one else had bothered to see, a small, weathered tag hanging from the dog's collar. The words engraved on it carried a truth so powerful, so unexpected, that it changed both of their lives forever. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The shelter was filled with noise, barking, whining, the shuffle of paws against concrete floors. But in the far corner, behind a chain-link door, one dog sat silently. His dark, soulful eyes followed every person who walked past, hope flickering and fading in equal measure. Unlike the others, he didn't jump, bark, or beg for attention. Instead, he sat with quiet dignity, as though waiting for someone who would truly see him. His fur was rough, his frame lean, but his gaze carried a depth that hinted at a story no one had yet bothered to uncover. Families came and went, their laughter echoing through the hall as children pointed to puppies wagging their tails. One by one, kennels emptied as dogs were chosen and carried into new lives. Yet his cage door never opened. Parents whispered excuses. He looks too old. He seems too serious. The kids want something playful. With each rejection, his head lowered slightly, though his eyes never stopped searching. To anyone watching closely, it was clear he wasn't giving up, but his patience was wearing thin. Each passing hour was another reminder of how invisible he had become. Still, there was something unshakable about him. Despite being overlooked again and again, he held himself with quiet strength. When volunteers brought food, he wagged his tail gently, grateful but subdued. When children peeked through the bars, he inched closer, offering a soft look, only to be pulled away toward more energetic dogs. He didn't fight for attention. He simply waited. His silence spoke louder than any bark. And in that silence lay a hidden truth. This was not just another dog abandoned by the world. This was a soul waiting for the right pair of eyes to notice him. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the shelter's small windows, casting long beams across the concrete floor. Families filed in, eager to find their perfect pet. Children squealed with excitement, pressing their faces against kennel doors, pointing at wagging tails and playful barks. One by one, dogs were chosen, paperwork signed, and happy endings written. Yet in the corner he remained unseen. Some glanced at him briefly, but their eyes quickly shifted elsewhere. His calm stillness was mistaken for disinterest, his quiet demeanor overlooked in favor of energetic bounces and puppy enthusiasm. Once again, hope slipped further from reach. A young couple stopped, peering at him through the bars. The woman tilted her head, her brow furrowed. "He's beautiful," she whispered. But the man shook his head. "Too big. Too serious. We need something friendlier." With that, they walked away, leaving him behind without a second thought. Later, a family of 4 lingered near his kennel. The children pointed at him, curious, but their mother whispered, "He looks like he's been through too much. We should find a younger one." Her words, though softly spoken, carried like daggers. Once again, the cage door stayed closed. By afternoon, the shelter was quieter. Empty kennels lined the hall where joyful barks once echoed. Volunteers smiled as they marked adoption papers, yet their eyes lingered with sadness on the one dog left behind. He pressed his nose against the bars, watching each family disappear through the exit doors with their new companions. His chest rose and fell with a long sigh, but still he waited. His rejection wasn't loud, it was quiet, steady, and constant. And though families kept passing him by, his eyes continued searching, holding onto a fragile thread of hope. As the shelter grew quieter, the dog shifted closer to the front of his kennel. He pressed his head gently against the cold metal bars, his eyes scanning every person who walked past. There was no barking, no jumping, just a silent plea written in the depth of his gaze. It was as if he was whispering, "Please don't overlook me. I'm still here." "I just need a chance." His tail gave the faintest wag whenever footsteps neared, but when they passed without stopping, the wag faded into stillness. His silence carried more emotion than any sound could. Volunteers noticed his quiet longing. One young girl paused to crouch near his kennel, her hand resting on the bars. "You're such a good boy," she whispered softly. He leaned forward, closing his eyes as if savoring the rare moment of gentle attention. But when her mother called her away, he retreated back into the shadows of his cage. That single second of kindness lingered with him, though it wasn't enough to erase the weight of rejection. His eyes followed them until they disappeared, the hope in his expression dimming once more into quiet resignation. At night, when the shelter lights dimmed and the barking settled, his silent plea continued in the stillness. While other dogs curled up in sleep, exhausted from a day of excitement, he lay awake, watching the door. His heart seemed to beat with a single question: would tomorrow be different? He had no words, no way to explain the story hidden behind his eyes, only the patience to keep waiting. To anyone who truly looked, his silence wasn't emptiness. It was a cry for love that grew louder with every passing day he was left behind. The following afternoon, the shelter doors creaked open again. This time it wasn't a bustling family or an excited child who walked in. It was a quiet man with thoughtful eyes. He moved slowly down the row of kennels, hands in his pockets, pausing at each cage. Dogs barked eagerly, some jumping against the bars, others whining for attention. But the man didn't rush. His gaze swept carefully, as though he was searching for something he couldn't quite describe. Then, as he reached the end of the row, his eyes fell on the silent dog, sitting in the far corner. For the first time, the dog lifted his head with intent. He didn't bark, didn't beg. He simply looked at the man with those same deep, pleading eyes that countless others had ignored. Something in that quiet stare made the man stop in his tracks. He crouched slowly, lowering himself to the dog's level, their eyes locking through the bars. The world around them faded. It was as if the shelter noise dissolved, leaving only the unspoken conversation between man and dog. The man's heart stirred. He didn't know why, but this dog felt different. Volunteers watched curiously. "He doesn't get much attention," one of them explained gently. "Most families pass him by," but the man hardly heard. His focus remained fixed on the dog, who now inched closer, pressing his nose against the bars. For a moment, neither moved. Then the man extended a hand through the small gap, his fingers brushing lightly against the dog's fur. It was cautious, tentative, but real. In that brief connection, a bond sparked, fragile yet undeniable. And though the man didn't know it yet, he was about to uncover a truth hidden in plain sight. As the man continued to kneel by the kennel, his eyes wandered to the dog's neck. Unlike most shelter dogs with plain ropes or temporary collars, this one wore something old and weathered. A faded leather strap clung to his fur, scratched and frayed with age. Hanging loosely from it was a small metal tag, dulled from years of wear. The man leaned closer, curiosity sparking. "Strange," he murmured, reaching gently through the bars. His fingers brushed the cool surface of the tag, and for the first time, he noticed faint engravings barely visible beneath the scratches. The dog remained perfectly still, as though he understood the man's intent. He didn't pull away or growl. Instead, he lowered his head slightly, allowing the stranger to lift the tag for a better look. The shelter volunteer noticed and shook her head. "We've never been able to read it clearly. It's too worn down. Probably nothing important." But the man wasn't convinced. His eyes narrowed as he rubbed the tag carefully, clearing away the dust and grime. Letters began to emerge, faint but undeniable. Something was written there, something no one else had taken the time to see. The man's heart quickened as the words revealed themselves. His breath caught, his expression shifting from curiosity to shock. He blinked, reading again to make sure he wasn't mistaken. This wasn't just an ordinary identification tag with a name and number. It carried a message, a clue, perhaps even a secret. Slowly, he looked up at the dog, whose eyes met his with quiet intensity, almost as if waiting for this very moment. The man's hands trembled slightly as he whispered, "How has no one else noticed this?" The answer etched on that tag was about to change everything. The man rubbed the tag once more, squinting in the dim shelter light until the engraving became clear. His breath hitched as he read aloud, "If found, please don't give up on me. I'm not dangerous, I'm special." His voice trembled over the final word. The shelter volunteer frowned, clearly hearing it for the first time. Whispers filled the back of his mind. Why would someone engrave such a plea? His chest tightened as he realized the depth of it. This wasn't a simple collar tag. This was a desperate message from whoever had once loved and lost this dog. The man's fingers shook as he traced the letters again, his thoughts racing. How many families had walked past without ever looking closely enough to read it? How many chances had been lost simply because no one had bothered to notice? He looked back at the dog, who stared at him with eyes that seemed to carry lifetimes of pain and patience. In that gaze, the message on the tag suddenly made sense. The animal wasn't aggressive, he was misunderstood. He wasn't unwanted. He was waiting for someone willing to see beyond the surface. The volunteer stepped closer, curious now. "What does it say?" she asked quietly. The man lifted the tag again, reading the words aloud for her. Her eyes widened, and for a moment even she was speechless. Around them, the shelter noises faded, leaving only the pounding of the man's heart. He realized then that the dog's story was far deeper than any adoption paper could reveal. This wasn't coincidence. He was meant to find this tag, to uncover the truth hidden in plain sight. And in that instant, one thought burned brightly in his mind. This dog's story wasn't finished. The man asked the shelter staff if they knew anything about the dog's past. One of the older volunteers sighed deeply, her eyes softening. "We don't have much, but there were rumors," she said quietly. She explained that the dog had once belonged to an elderly man who lived alone. The two were inseparable. Neighbors remembered seeing the dog walking proudly by his side every morning. But when the man passed away suddenly, the dog was left with no family willing to take him. He was surrendered to the shelter, carrying only the worn collar his master had given him. The words on the tag now felt even more powerful. They weren't just a message, they were a legacy. Perhaps the elderly man had known his companion might face rejection, had feared people would misunderstand the dog's serious nature. By engraving those words, he gave the animal one final chance, a silent plea to the world not to give up on him. The man listening to this story felt his chest tighten. He could almost picture the lonely evenings the dog must have endured, waiting for someone who never returned, clinging to the last reminder of love he once had. As the story sank in, the dog pressed closer to the bars, his eyes locked on the man's. There was no anger there, no bitterness, only patience and quiet hope. It was as if he had been waiting for someone to finally understand. The man swallowed hard, his decision already forming in his heart. This wasn't just a stray waiting for adoption. This was a loyal soul, carrying the weight of a promise, still holding on to faith that someone would answer the words engraved on his tag. And maybe, just maybe, that someone was him. The man stood in silence, his hand still resting on the tag, his thoughts a whirlwind. Around him, the shelter echoed with barks and whines. But all he could hear was the faint plea carved into that piece of metal. "Please don't give up on me." He straightened slowly, locking eyes with the dog once more. In that look, he felt an undeniable pull, as though fate itself had led him there. His heart pounded with a clarity he hadn't expected. For the first time, he didn't see an abandoned shelter dog. He saw a companion waiting to be saved. The volunteer broke the silence gently. "Do you want to meet him outside the kennel?" she asked, almost hesitant. The man nodded, his decision already made. As the gate opened, the dog stepped forward cautiously, his movements slow and deliberate, as though testing whether this was real. The man knelt down, extending his hand. The dog sniffed it once, then pressed his head firmly into the stranger's palm. The connection was instant, electric. Trust formed in a single heartbeat. The man's throat tightened as he whispered, "You've waited long enough. Let's go home." Paperwork was brought out, signatures scribbled, and the final adoption confirmed. Other staff members gathered, smiling softly, some even misty-eyed. "He's been here too long," one admitted. I was beginning to lose hope for him. But hope had returned in the form of one man willing to see what no one else had noticed. As the leash was clipped gently to the dog's collar, the animal's tail wagged, hesitant at first, then stronger, freer. It wasn't just a new chapter beginning. It was a promise fulfilled. The man wasn't rescuing the dog alone. In truth, they were rescuing each other. The first night in his new home was quiet. The dog explored cautiously, sniffing every corner as if memorizing the space. His movements were hesitant, his body tense, like he expected to be sent back at any moment. But the man gave him space, speaking softly, reassuring him with gentle pats and calm words. When the dog finally curled up in the living room, the man placed a blanket beside him and stayed nearby. For the first time in years, the animal slept without the echo of barking cages. His chest rose and fell peacefully, as though trust had returned. Days turned into weeks, and the transformation was undeniable. The once solemn dog began to wag his tail with freedom, bounding across the yard with bursts of joy. His eyes, once heavy with sorrow, now sparkled with life. Neighbors who had seen him as a sad, unwanted shelter dog were stunned by the change. Children reached out to pet him, and instead of shrinking back, he leaned in with calm acceptance. The man watched every moment with pride, grateful for the chance to witness the healing. Love had done what loneliness never could. It had awakened his spirit. The bond between them deepened quickly. The dog followed the man everywhere, by his side in the garden, resting at his feet in the evenings, waiting patiently by the door when he left. It was more than loyalty. It was devotion. The tag on his collar still hung there, but its meaning had changed. It was no longer a desperate plea. It was a reminder of the journey that brought them together. Each wag, each nuzzle, each quiet moment proved a simple truth. The dog had not been waiting for just anyone. He had been waiting for him. One quiet evening, as the man sat in his living room with the dog curled at his feet, his eyes fell once more on the faded tag. He turned it over in his hand, running his thumb across the engraving. "Please don't give up on me. I'm not dangerous, I'm special." The words struck him differently now. They weren't just a plea from the past, they were proof of the resilience of love. This dog had carried those words like a shield through years of rejection, waiting for someone willing to read them and believe. That someone had finally come. The man reached down, scratching behind the dog's ears, and whispered, "You're home now. No one will ever give up on you again." The dog lifted his head, pressing his nose against the man's hand with quiet gratitude. In that moment, the message on the tag wasn't just about him. It was about every soul overlooked, every life waiting for a second chance. The lesson was clear. Sometimes the most extraordinary stories are hidden in the places we least expect, waiting for the right eyes to notice, the right heart to listen. News of the adoption spread quickly through the neighborhood, and even among shelter volunteers. People who once walked past the dog with dismissive glances now marveled at his transformation. "He was never broken," one volunteer said softly. "He just needed to be seen." The man smiled, watching his companion rest peacefully. The tag that had once been ignored had saved the dog's life by leading him to the right person, and in turn, the dog had saved his. It was more than adoption, it was destiny, a reminder that love, when finally given, can rewrite even the saddest story.